I want dating to be something you can actually enjoy, something that turns into an amazing relationship, and if you desire it, an amazing marriage. And I know that in today's world, today's dating landscape, things can seem a lot more exhausting, complex. They feel like there's too many rules, so on and so forth, right? And I get it, and I understand. But I want you to know that you got to start looking at it differently, because yes, there are things to be mindful of. There is guidance that I think you have to consider or embrace so that you can get the results that you truly want and truly deserve. And don't look at all that information as too much to deal with, too much to digest, or you just feel like you don't want to deal with all that. Take a deep breath, all right? Take a deep breath and trust and believe that as long as you start to implement the things that we discuss, it's going to be worth it. And that's what matters, that it's worth it and that you get the results that you're looking for. So, with that said, I wanted to lay out some things that you should consider not doing before you go on a first date with a man. You know, that first date can be a big event for a lot of people because sometimes that's your first impression. They always say you only get one chance to make a first impression. And there are things to consider to lay down the foundation and groundwork to have a greater chance at success. Okay. And I also want to say this, and I'm mentioning it at the end actually. There's an important point for you to consider when it comes to dating in general. But let's put a pin in that. Let's focus on some of these things I want you to potentially not do before you go on a first date with that man. And the first one that might be to your surprise is don't talk too much on the phone with him. Hear me out. So I know many of you, the idea of talking on the phone is what you're supposed to do, right? And it's an opportunity to gain a bunch of information, understand if you like the person, things of that nature. And though I understand it, I actually think people are getting it wrong. Here's why. And there's a few reasons why to this. Number one, let's go with the simplest one. If you talk too much on the phone before your first date, you're eliminating a lot of things you guys can talk about on the first date. Okay? Like you don't want to take that opportunity away from it because that can sway how the date goes. And it's their first time hanging out with each other in person. You want to give yourselves a better opportunity to enjoy each other. Now, granted, you should be able to enjoy each other beyond having those preliminary discussions. I just think it's wise, or it's in your best interest to leave as much on the table to discuss as possible, right? Also, a big reason is because it's so much better to have a lot of these conversations in person, because now you don't get to just hear the answers, you get to watch him, look at his body language, see if you pick up on anything that might give you more insight than the words coming out of his mouth. A lot of people who end up, whether it be get scammed, fall for a narcissist, get caught up with the wrong guy in general, they do so because they fall in love with the words he's speaking, all right? And they're not really looking at him as a whole. And again, getting that opportunity to evaluate that body language, which is so, so important. So that's layer number one, or that's reason number one to that. You want to be able to have more to discuss and read more of what he's trying to express. Another huge reason why you don't want to talk too much on the phone is what I've seen as a coach happen so many times is you'll have two people who, yes, on the phone, and this is more specific to the individuals who didn't already meet in person, because sometimes your first date comes after you already met this person face to face, whether it be out and about, whether it be at work, whatever. So in that case, it'll be a little bit different. But if your first engagement was, let's say, online, right? So you've never met face to face, here is where this reason comes into play. A lot of people then go on the phone, and the phone is enjoyable. They're having a great time. They're talking for hours. They're falling for each other, or at least one person is falling for the other, right? And then they eventually finally meet in person, and it's just not the same. The energy's not the same. Maybe the attraction is not there. Maybe what you thought they looked like, which again, sometimes if it's an online dating experience, it could be a catfish, right? Or maybe not a blatant catfish. And for those of you who may not know what catfish means, it means someone who presents a certain kind of way. They basically deceive you and making you think they look a certain kind of way when they don't. All right, they completely flip the script on you. And so the attraction might not be there. And forget just the attraction for you. Because you might be saying to me, but Stefan, if we are enjoying each other on the phone and I liked his pictures or whatever, what I saw, even if he doesn't look as good, I'll be fine. Okay, but will he? There's a lot of situations where women, again, thought everything was going great, have the first date, and notice everything changed. And what they don't realize is sometimes that's because he didn't find himself as attracted to her as he would have liked to have been. All right. And that completely changes the way he approaches things. Some guys may still hang around and want to have sex with you and things of that nature, but their interest in pursuing more can change. So a way to at least lessen the chance of there being any misunderstanding, confusion, whatever, let's wait till we meet in person. So it's not just the fact that there might be a switch up afterwards, but the thing is, when you talk so much on the phone leading up to it, you become so much more emotionally invested, all right? Therefore, it becomes harder to break away or harder to accept that maybe things aren't what they need to be in order to move forward, which contributes to the woman, in many cases, hanging on to a man who isn't best for her. Because now, from all that phone talk, she's created a fantasy in her head. And even though the reality is not lining up, she's not prepared to let go of the fantasy. And that contributes to things dragging on way longer than they should. Or she enjoys the conversation so much that even though he's not what she needs in so many other ways, she wants to hold on to that. So all of that to say, if we avoided too much talking on the phone, waited till we met in person, again, we can lessen the chances of these issues arising. And then one more thing I'm going to say, and then we'll move on to the next point. I think we have to remember that texting, phone conversations, these are not the natural modes of communication, all right? This is all technology. And the reality is that if you end up in a relationship with this man, married to this man, what's going to matter is your in-person interaction, because the majority of your time interacting with him will be in person. So to me, more weight and emphasis should be on that. I think people get way too comfortable with the phone and the texting and all these different things. And again, it's very easy and possible to enjoy the interaction on those modes of communication, even when in person, it's very flat. It's not there. Something's off. Okay? So, again, I know a lot of people is like, nah, there's plenty of people who talk on the phone a lot before they had the first date and everything worked out great. So it's not saying that it can't work out, but I'm telling you, I have so many stories of things going wrong, and it could have been avoided, or at least the hurt of it could have been avoided if they would have lessened that phone communication before that date happened. All right, so here's another thing you should avoid doing before going on a first date with him, and that is having any sexual talk, okay? Now, for some of you, you might be like, oh, of course, I would never do that, and that's fine. But many sometimes may cross that line, right? Maybe there was some phone conversations late at night, and you happen to be, he caught you in a moment where you were feeling a little freaky, whatever, right? Ain't nobody judging. And you might let some words slip out. You might engage in conversations that otherwise you wouldn't have, right? And it might feel good and enjoyable in that moment, but you have to understand what you're now setting yourself up for. Because if you are engaging in that sexual talk, well, there's going to be a greater expectation of you actually sleeping with him, right? And if that's not your intent and that's not your plan, at least anytime soon, right? And we're not going to get right now into the waiting before. We understand, or at least I hope you understand, the waiting before marriage when you're a believer is the way to go, right? But I always say I recognize that this doesn't always happen. Plenty of people cross that line before it, and I still want to be able to discuss this dynamic for those who may venture on that path, right? So I have to also say this. If you, in your mind, for whatever reason, right or wrong, you actually do plan on getting it on that fast, that's a different story. Now, I would argue with you that if your goal ultimately is relationship, you got to slow down. You don't want to cross that line fast because you got to give yourself proper time to evaluate this man and what you're getting yourself into. And if you do things too fast, there's a greater chance of issues arising. Yes, there are couples out there who slept with each other on the first night and end up getting married. But for every success story, I can give you thousands more where it does not go that way, okay? But let's get back to this talking sexual. So there's going to be a greater expectation of it. And it also can become a huge distraction because now sometimes by letting that man think you're, as they say, about that life, that might be the reason why now he wants to hold on and keep things going. Whereas if we keep away from the sexual and stay on just getting to know each other, discussions that have substance to it, then and giving us a better chance of seeing do we really like each other, right? Now that is a healthier foundation to set. Because if he sticks around, then you know it's about, well, there's a better chance that it's about him actually liking you and you liking him. Because listen, it's not just the man getting distracted by it. Let's talk about it for a second. It's hitting my spirits. Let's talk about it. Because a lot of times when we frame these conversations, we focus on the man wanting to lay down with you and things of that nature. But hey, some of you are the one who wants to be laying down. Like, again, let's just be real. Some of you, as adults, maybe it's been a long time and you're like, man, I really could use some, whatever the case may be. And that is your desire. And again, you just have to make sure you understand what you're setting yourself up for, why you're even doing it, right? And here's a big question to ask yourself. You know, again, aside from the spiritual aspect of things, if you do this with him, as in sleep with him, are you going to be okay with whatever happens the next day? Meaning, a lot of women will lay down with the man, even in that first date, with the mindset of, this will lock him in more. This will make him like me more. She's very confident in her skills, so she thinks that's a way to impress him. And then he does, whether he's impressed or not, he decides to not stick around. And now that woman feels cheated, used, so on and so forth. Because the reason why she was doing it, again, aside from the spiritual, it was the wrong reason. To me, you've got to be like, all right, even if y'all don't talk to each other no more after that, you would be okay. Because it was what you wanted to do for whatever your reasons were. All right? Because at least that way, we're eliminating that deeper hurt, that resentment, that negativity that lingers with feeling used and taken advantage of, right? Or feeling inadequate because you feel like, well, why didn't my sex keep him around, right? This happens to some women. So we have to be mindful of that, right? But at the end of the day, it would be wise, even if you're looking to get down, it would be wise to avoid the sex talk before that first date. Because again, you don't even know if you're going to still like him when you meet him, right? And you want to make sure you guys are actually both attracted to each other in person and like each other's energy in person. All right, so let's keep this going. Another thing I think you should avoid doing before going on a first date with him is telling a bunch of people about it, okay? So first, this is a side note, but it connects to what we're talking about. I think in today's world, too many people have gotten more become more open books to their life. Social media has created an environment where people are letting the whole world know their business, right? In ways that, again, are unnatural, right? It was not supposed to be like, well, again, just it wasn't like this once upon a time. And on a smaller level, you got people who they meet a guy, they're ready to go on a date, and they're so quick to just go telling friends, family, whoever, out of excitement. And I get it. I get it. Depending on what the situation is, who the person is, it's understandable to get excited, to want to tell people. I get it. But you got to be careful with letting too many people in too soon. Letting too many people in general, but especially even too soon. Because that can invite all kinds of other potential issues. One, it can invite unnecessary pressure. Because now, after you done told all these people about this date you're about to go on, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people asking you for a follow-up. And if things don't go well, you may not want to deal with that. You may feel nervous about, how you show up because you have to report back to these people. You don't want that. Two, you are inviting the potential of negative feedback. So many people tell, let's say, their friends and family members, or other women in your circle, and sometimes you're not mindful or aware of the fact that some of those women, now I'm not saying not all, but some of them are very negative. They're biased in their input because maybe they're dealing with their own unhealthy situation. Maybe they have a toxic view of men, whatever it is, and now they're projecting this on you, and they're adding this negative energy that you're going to bring into that first date. All right? Because if you have too many voices in your head and now you go on that first date, it can throw you off. Beyond that, forget just the negative perspectives and input. They may simply give you bad advice. like, oh girl, you need to do this and do that and boom, 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 boom. And it's like, no. Number one, just be yourself. All right? Be true to who you are. Don't overthink things. And I know I'm saying that as I'm giving you stuff to consider and think about, but when it's time to go on that date, you got to be able just to breathe, be you, and focus on enjoying yourself. But I've seen women derail their opportunities because they took in too many voices and it had them doing unnecessary nonsense, right? So if you're going to get opinion and advice, please make sure you are getting it from a healthy source. Someone who can speak objectively, who again, is going to guide you in a more positive way. Because that's the thing. You want to be able to come into this date with a positive mindset. Does it automatically mean things will go great? No. But if you come in with a negative mindset, you're almost ensuring it's going to be a negative experience. All right? So be mindful of that. Limit how many people you tell. Really, I think maybe just one other person. And the reason why it's good to tell at least one person is because you need people who are aware of your whereabouts. You're a woman, you have to make sure you're safe, right? So it's good that someone knows, just in case, God forbid, something was to happen. They need to know what's going on, who you were out with. So I think it's good that you have at least one individual who's fully aware of the situation, all right, and can have your back. Outside of that, pump your brakes. You can tell more people as things progress. And again, even then, you just want to be careful of who you are bringing into your relationships and your dating situations, and if those people are truly helpful or are they going to be hurtful. All right, so before we move on to the next point, I want to give you this opportunity to join my messaging club. So it's text. You can receive the messages various ways, but either way, it's a club that you're going to receive positive messages weekly, even personalized videos from me, just pouring love and positivity into you, helping you stay on the right track. Go to www.messagesbystefan.com. And the great thing is this club, it's only $5 a month, and a portion of the proceeds will be going to my nonprofit, Healing Generations Foundation, which we plan on doing a lot of big things, but most specifically, creating opportunities for more people to receive counseling and therapy, because I think it's so important. but a lot of people don't have access to it. They can't afford it. So my nonprofit aims to supply more people with that opportunity. So again, click the link in the description or the comment section and join today. So now, the next thing, piggybacking off the last point that we discussed, to not do before your first date with him, to not do before your first date with him, is being negative. All right. Now, I really want to help you look at this from a different way, because I think when you guys think being negative, you're thinking solely like you being negative towards the man. But I also think it's about being negative in the sense of what you're even dealing with. Hear me out. Now, I, of course, believe that the person that we're going to be with has to be able to handle our ups and downs, right? Not our blatant, disrespectful downs, not just throwing them a bunch of trash and saying, accept it if you really want to be with me or love me. But the reality is, as human beings, we're going to have our happy moments. We're going to have our sad moments, our frustrated moments, right? And someone has to be able to understand that that moment doesn't define us and how they can work with us in those moments. However, I do think that before going on a first date, we want to minimize that as much as possible. We haven't established a rapport yet for us to have them dealing with the negativity of our life right now. All right. So again, this is focused on the people who have yet to even go on that first date. After you guys have been dating or going on that first date, it's different to me. Because to me, if we go on that first date, we like each other, things are moving well, we're establishing essentially like credit with each other. So now, if we're having that bad moment or dealing with some negative things and we need to let off our frustrations, they already have a good experience to pull from with us to not define us by that negative moment. But when you're just starting off, haven't even gone on a date, and you're already feeding them the negative, the frustration, the anger, all this stuff, and they don't have anything to pull from positive, well, it's very easy for someone to be like, you know what, this is drama, this is too much, I'm not dealing with all that, all right? So I want you to be mindful, and I think the way to do that, if you are engaging in phone conversations before that first date, is if you know you're in a bad mood, if you know you're dealing with something difficult, and let's say that phone rings and he's calling you, don't answer yet. And when I say don't answer, you can text them and say, hey, dealing with something right now, I'll call you back later today. And make sure before you jump on that phone with him, you take a deep breath, you breathe, you pray, you get yourself back to a calm, cool place and focus on the positive, all right? And now if you can discuss what you're dealing with in a calm, positive manner, that's better. But I still think we don't need to dive into all that when we haven't even done the first date yet. All right. And remember, I'm the one who believes you shouldn't be having that much phone conversations to begin with before that first date. So something to be mindful of, because it can affect people's perception of you. And again, it's not the best foundation to lay, right? That's really all it is. All right, so we got a couple more to go. And another thing you should avoid doing before a first date with him, and really you should avoid doing it within the whole dating process, is jumping to conclusions, okay? Now, I want to start off with social media, because I've seen this happen so many times, where people are dating, first date or not, right? And naturally you're looking at that person's social media, you might be lurking on their page, whatever, checking out their stories, and you're seeing posts, and I say you, but again, I've had this happen with so many women. They're looking at posts, and again, they're assuming what this post means. Like one example is, woman was dating this man, and she saw him like on a trip somewhere. And she was like, oh, he must be seeing other women. It's like, wait a minute. Like, you're just going to assume he's seeing, there's no woman in the clip, right? And God forbid, even if there was a woman in the clip, do you know if that's his sister, his mother, his coworker, whatever? Unless you actually see them in the clip being intimate or something, that's a whole different story. But She just ran with this idea that he must be seeing other people. Oh, I'm not going to call him. I'll wait for him to reach out to me. And it just turned into this whole other thing when all she had to do was talk to him about it. Or choose to leave it alone, though I think talking about it is better if it's actually bothering you and you're sitting here and going to allow yourself to think it might mean all kinds of other possibilities. So to bring peace and clarity, discuss it, right? And I understand the fear is, well, I don't want to look like I'm over here lurking on his page and, feeling some kind of way about things. Yeah, but you are. You are. And if you don't address it and you allow your brain to run wild, you're inviting unnecessary trouble and drama to what could be a potentially great situation. And it might be a very explainable thing. Now, I gave you one example, but there's tons of examples of people jumping to conclusions. Man, I've heard so many stories, and stories where the woman, what her assumption was dead wrong, was dead wrong. And some have lost out on opportunities with some really great men because of their assumptions. So you don't want to do that. But it's not just the social media assumptions. It's the assumptions in general, okay? I understand it's very natural for a lot of women to constantly be analyzing and processing and trying to figure things out. But the unfortunate thing is, in doing that and not communicating, it again invites all these potential scenarios in your head. And then if we add the layer of, remember we talked about telling other people, that's that opportunity for more negative advice and perspective to be poured into you. And again, even in situations where, let's say, you don't quote unquote act on the assumption in your head, you don't run with it. You say, okay, I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But you haven't truly released it from within you. And now you don't realize that your energy is different towards him. Your attitude is different towards him. And now the whole situation is taking a left turn because he's feeling this negativity or this change. He doesn't like it. And then when he asks you, is everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And it's like, no, it's not. Everything is not fine. You're not okay because you're bothered by this thought that you've put in your head or someone else did that isn't even true. Now, for the sake of argument, I understand that sometimes the assumption is true. Sometimes the negative thought is accurate, right? I get that. But to reach that conclusion, talk about it, address it. But don't just run with it because you're only setting yourself up for more problems. So avoid the assumptions, communicate with that man, and really get to a place of peace. And I will say this too, to help you with just moving forward, pray about it as well. Again, I think prayer is a beautiful, powerful, amazing tool that you got to use at your disposal as often as possible. And when you're stressing about things, overanalyzing, overthinking, pray. I always say pray before you overthink. All right? Go to God, let God put that peace in you, and just move forward as you need to in that situation. All right, so another thing you should avoid doing before that first date, and this kind of just encompasses what we were talking about earlier, and that is moving too fast, okay? So what I mean by that is this. I'm someone, let me just put this out there real quick. I'm someone who believes in connection. I believe that connection can typically really is, I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I really believe it pretty much is a very instant experience, meaning people who have experienced connection will say that they felt it in that first conversation, that first meeting, that maybe that first week, right? It's not something that it takes time for them to see. They feel it immediately. And so, and with that, I understand that some situations are going to move a lot faster than others. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that in general. However, remember what we talked about here, this is about before that first date, before truly interacting in person. And the reason why I'm saying don't move too fast is because, again, as I mentioned before, sometimes those phone conversations, or even forget just the phone conversation, sometimes your desire for this to be like, man, this might be it, pulls you into that thought of fantasy of what you're hoping for and dreaming about, and you're laying out in your head, and you might already be picturing you walking down the aisle with this man, and how your wedding is gonna look, and who you're gonna invite, and all this stuff. Now, some of y'all may be like, we don't do that. Listen, some people do, and we're not gonna judge them, and we don't. I don't want anyone to feel bad about it. It happens. It happens, right? You get so caught up in your dreams and desires, and in that, that can cause you to overlook red flags. That can cause you to maybe engage in that sexual talk really fast because you're already thinking, well, okay, now I'm trying to get this thing popping so we can get to that next level, whatever the case may be, okay? And then I've seen extreme situations where you, again, maybe not right before the first date, but maybe even just after it, where women are giving money, where women are just doing a lot for that man, hoping for things to progress or believing this is something more than it might actually be. So you just want to be careful that you are aware of what you are experiencing, but you are not rushing to the finish line, okay? You are mindful that it's about pacing yourself, not in a fear type of way, just in a being wise about, all right, we got to make sure we do our due diligence, we cover all bases, and again, make sure that we are grasping the full reality of the situation and not living in the fantasy of it, all right? And I think if we do that, and I have to say it again, and praying will help make sure you don't jump ahead too soon, all right? It'll keep you where you need to be and moving in at the right pace. So pray, take a deep breath, and focus on the reality, not the fantasy. All right, and the last but not least reason or thing you should avoid doing before that first date is focusing so much on the hope rather than the experience. So remember in the beginning of the video, I said there's something I need you to stay and listen to, and this is what I want to highlight. I believe a lot of women, people in general, it happens to men too, dating becomes so exhausting to them because it's this roller coaster ride of hope, disappointment, hope, disappointment, hope, disappointment. And when you are going through that up and down so much, you're just like, yo, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm tired. This is exhausting. This isn't worth it. All these things, right? And unfortunately, if you go through that enough, it's what I call dating fatigue. Even if the right person came next, you are now in a more negative mindset. You don't have the energy for them. It can really throw you off. So I believe that one of the things that would be extremely helpful for everyone is don't focus on hope, focus on experience. Meaning, when you meet this guy and you guys are supposed to go on this date, you go into it saying, this is an opportunity to learn if this is the man for me. This is an opportunity for me to enjoy myself. This is an opportunity for me to possibly, depending on where you're going, try out a new place, try a new experience. This is an opportunity for me to get more comfortable with going on dates. It's about the experience. And that way, if it doesn't work out with him specifically, you are still able to have said, all right, I enjoyed myself because I got my experience out of it. You know what I'm saying? Now, granted, some experiences will just be bad. There's no way to avoid that in some cases, okay? But even then, the way to look at that is, all right, well, now I know that's not going to work. Let's keep it moving. And let me learn from this whatever I can, if there is a lesson in it, and there usually is, right? And let me apply. And I have to say, healthy, positive lesson, not negative. Not, well, I ain't going to trust a man ever again, or I'm not going to ever do this. Don't be negative, all right? Healthy, positive lessons that's going to increase the chances of a great experience going forward. But all that to say, focus on the experience. And I think that will help you stay in a more positive mindset. That will help you be more ready and prepared to receive the blessing that God truly has for you. Thank you for watching this video. I pray it was helpful to you. Be sure to watch this one over here on why men start dating you when they're not even ready for a relationship. Because listen, no matter how many tips I give you, no matter how much guidance I give you or anyone gives you, right?